welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Monday, March the 5th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, our first daily dose of happy for the day, and we're off to a roaring start this week. That's the way you always want to look at a Monday, right? You want to look at it as we're off to a roaring start. Things are going to be great. This is going to be a good week, and it is going to be a good week. In fact, I'm going to do a little personal thing here. I'm going to shout out to my brother because tomorrow's his birthday. So happy birthday, bro. That's another good thing going on this week. So, things are good. How are things with you, Tom?
Off to a roaring start. No, everything's good. I definitely was triggered by this topic today because this was my major issue in life of the last, ever since in my 20s. Climate change has been on my mind and been a big issue in my life. So I decided to finally put it on the agenda for Law of Attraction show. I've been thinking about it via Law of Attraction for a long time. So, yeah, that's the big thing on my mind.
Okay, well, that's understandable.
Besides, I'm just enjoying my life and really finding that everything's just fine and I'm moving along. But this is an interesting topic, very, very triggering.
There's a certain degree of similarity between the topic and my mirror work. And I say that because my mirror work for the first day or two was really uncomfortable. And it was hard to do. Yeah. And the more that I've done it, by day 4, it had like 1/10 of the charge that it had on day 1, which was really surprising. I didn't expect it to reduce in charge that quickly, but it did. And I'm now on day, let's see, where am I? I'm on day 15. I'm halfway to my goal of 30. Hey, I just realized that.
Congratulations.
I'm halfway to my goal of 30. This is great. I love this.
So it only took you like several days to get used to looking at your face, and then you said, well, it's what I got, and I got to just accept it.
Well, more precisely, it took me...
I'm kidding.
No, that's not actually all that far off. It took me 4 days to get used to looking into my own eyes and saying I love you. That's real. I mean, because the first time I did that, I just couldn't look. I just looked away. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It was just, it felt too weird and too freaky. Like, oh, God, I can't do this.
Like a new age thing? Or
something like that. I don't know exactly what. But it
triggered a bunch of stuff to look in your eyes.
Yeah. And the only reason, Tom, honestly, the only reason why I stuck with it on day 2 was because Jack Canfield did it. If Jack Canfield hadn't done it, I don't think I'd still be doing it. I think I would have given up on day 2. But because I respect Jack immensely, and because he did, I said, oh, God, all right, if he can do it, I can do it. And besides that, he promised that if you do it for like 30 to 40 days, your negative self-talk goes away. And if I reminded myself of that, I was like, okay, yeah, that's really why I'm doing this. I'm getting rid of the negative self-talk. Okay, let's do this thing. Okay, Mirror, where are you?
I'm looking forward to hearing your progress reports. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. As I'm saying that, I'm thinking to myself, has my negative self-talk reduced? I can't say it's reduced. What it is quieter. In other words, if let's say you can say that your self-talk has a certain volume level. Now the volume level is like 50% of it. It's like half the volume that it was before. Wow. It's still all there. I mean, I hear all of it. But it's just quieter.
Yeah, I did a bunch of mirror work years ago, and actually not that long ago, but I've done it a bunch of times. But at first, it was the same thing. It was there was a charge around doing it, but not a huge charge. I can remember times where it was difficult at first to look into my eyes and to really own the fact that, well, how happy are you, Tom? How happy are you? That's kind of what I was always dealing with. Was admitting to myself that, that I wasn't as happy as I might think I was. But the more I did the mirror work and accepted that there's an infinite being looking at me through the mirror and that's who I am. And, it's just a very matter of fact thing. It just became like now I just always pass a mirror and I know that who I'm looking at is that infinite being that I know I am and that I've chosen to identify with.
Sure. Yeah.
And it definitely changed my talk, but just as much as my psychologist friend who told me to invite all the parts of me to come and sit by my fire at night, and that there is no part that's not welcome at my hearth, at my fire, and just getting comfortable with the fact that there's nothing about me that I can do, that I want to do anything other than love fully. Nothing about me, that I want to do anything other than love fully. And that's been really transformative for me.
Well, actually, Louise and I have something similar, although we do it as kind of a joke. We have a party in our minds that we're going to invite people to, but there are certain people we won't invite. So, for instance, we won't invite Abby Normal. And we won't invite arthritis.
Arthritis.
There are a number of people like that we won't invite, but the others we'll invite.
Okay.
We'll invite Happiness, and
Yeah.
So we'll invite the good ones, right?
Well, I'm inviting all of them. I'm inviting all the ones that I think are monsters and ugly and deformed and dying and they're getting old, and all the ones that are decrepit and that have weird personalities that make mistakes and pick their nose. And every single one of them is welcome at my fire, because I feel like I don't want to make any part of me wrong,
You're not going to throw them in the fire. I give you credit for that.
And I still get judgmental of myself and other people, so it makes me realize, well, that's just one of those deep-seated old patterns that I got as a kid, that this belief that judging myself or judging other people has some value, as if to make myself better than them or to make myself not good enough in the eyes of others or in the eyes of myself. All of that is just not a game I want to play. I want to find the beauty of who I am with all of my flaws, with the fact that I'm going to leave this body one day and that my body might deteriorate a whole lot, and just be accepting of everything,
Okay. Well, why don't you accept the burden of responsibility and say, I'm going to introduce the topic today in a wondrous way.
Okay. Well, this is a wondrous topic because it's the climate change issue, in my mind, says, we are facing a dire situation on the planet as a species, and that all the species are facing. Not the rocks so much, but like the.
Well, I don't know. You're gonna have the rock lobby after you pretty soon.
But the water supply, all the different species that are going extinct at a huge rate, more than any other time in the history of the world, pretty much, and the seventh greatest extinction. And I could go on and on because I was a major environmentalist who studied this stuff like hugely. I was always way ahead of the curve of anybody I knew in terms of being able to tell people what the latest science was of climate change. And it was at least 10 years ago where I was clearly, the scientists were saying, we are pretty much screwed, that we're not getting out of this one. No one's getting out of this one alive. That, the deterioration of the earth is already underway and there's no stopping it. And therefore there will be mass die off and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we're already seeing it in terms of many species. So is the way the bees go is the way the humans are going to go. The way the birds go are the way the humans are going to go. The way the plants go, a mass extinction of different species will then cause the extinction of us.
Okay, now you're completely depressing me. So
yeah, okay. So anyway, and I could go on and on. And this is what I used to do. But then I would cite all the different scientists who are saying, and then their predictions were worse than mine. Anyway, so I learned from all that it was so depressing to my life, and I was combining it with also expecting economic decline and everything, that I was so depressing to my life that I was ruining my friendships, ruining my relationship with my wife, who pretty much agreed with me, but she was then as freaked out as I was. And so we didn't know what to do, where to go, where to live in the world. How would we ever be safe? How would our kids be safe? How would we ever have grandchildren? All these things, because we saw this incredibly devastating thing happening. So what happened to me was I started to realize one day, it dawned on me, and I don't know if I had heard something. I wasn't into Abraham at the time, but I heard something that said, that convinced me really clearly that if I'm not happy, if I'm not fundamentally happy, which I had been most all of my adult life, then how can I, help anybody? How can I communicate anything of value to anybody if my bottom line is I expect things to go to hell in a handbasket? I expect the worst. I expect things are really screwed up. And it's sort of like this whole thing compares to someone who, say, had an illness and the doctor tells them you're going to die in 6 months and there's nothing you can do about it, which many doctors are happy to tell people. They're not happy to tell them, but they tell them. Doctors think that that's their job. Lots of doctors think that's their job to tell people, you have a terminal illness and you will only live 6 months. And I'm sorry, there's nothing that can be done. And you should just get your things in order because you're leaving. And lots of people end up leaving because the doctor told them that and they believe it. And the disease runs its course. And they're gone. Other people go, I don't want that. I'm going to get 3 other opinions. And besides that, I decide I'm going to live. And so they look for every possible healing out there. And they change their entire mental, ideas about it, mental, emotional ideas. And some of them survive.
Against all the odds.
Against all the odds. So to wrap this up, I know I go on and on sometimes, but I just want to say that. So the bottom line is that I realized that I could not live that way. It was tearing my life apart. And so I said, okay, that led me on a soul quest, on a journey that led me eventually to Abraham and eventually to the realization that I am in control of my reality and I can choose the thoughts I want to have about everything in my world, and I am somehow a creator. So even though I can look at external signs and symptoms and still say, it's a bad situation, it's a deteriorating situation, but if I focus on that and then I worry about it and I make that my concern, I can become nothing other than a miserable person who's part of the problem. But if I do the opposite and I say, I'm going to focus on what's good here, I'm going to tell a better feeling story about this situation, I'm going to have faith in a higher source that's behind all of this, I'm going to look for the eternalness of life rather than the temporariness of it, I can then be a person who is an advocate for life itself, for literally the source of creation, for literally, what really is in control of the life that we have, of what life is. And is life an infinite experience? Are we infinite beings? Is this planet connected to infinite source energy? And so that's what it came down to. And now my whole life is about talking to people about infinite source energy. And that's what we are, and that's what the planet is.
What a great shift. I mean, that's a fantastic shift you made.
Yeah, and it's still going on. And I realized in approaching this topic that I still am, sitting with this fact, just like a person who had a terminal illness in their body would be saying, well, I could beat this. I could end up sticking around, and I've decided I want to, and I know that I might not. I might end up leaving. And the same thing, I look at climate change and I go, this is something you could say, well, we're gonna get beyond this, no problem. And the other part of me says, well, I don't know, we'll get beyond this, no problem. Maybe all kinds of things are going to happen. But what's the attitude I want to have through the whole thing? The same way as if I had the terminal illness. And what does that connect me to? What does that attitude connect me to?
Yeah. And one of the things that really amazes me about this kind of topic, not specifically climate change, but anything where we have a very strong, what you and I called before the show, a very a very strong, powerful charge. And that charge is so powerful that it becomes all-consuming. And we focus all of our attention on it and so forth. This is especially interesting when we're exposed to the teachings of Abraham and other LOA teachers who say what we think about becomes reality. And so now we're all of a sudden in a space where we're thinking about this stuff, and more of us are thinking about it, and we're putting a lot of energy into it, and as a result, we are encouraging it to become reality. Well, wait, that's not what I wanted to have happen. But we begin to realize, oh, geez. Yet early on, before we discover all this stuff, before we learn these teachings, we all who get caught up in these traps And that's what they really are. They're traps that we've set for ourselves. When we get caught up in these traps, we basically buy into the idea of the inevitability of it. And in so doing, we give up our power, which is really interesting. In fact, it gets so bad that if you talk to somebody who's stuck in something like this, and it doesn't have to be climate change, it could be any kind of major issue. But if you talk to somebody who's stuck in that issue and you propose to them something along the following line, they can't handle it. So like with a climate change person, you say, can you imagine the power of your mind changing the climate for good? And you'll get just blank looks. You'll get blinks of the eye. And then you'll get a long argument saying, well, you've got your head in the sand. Here's what's really going on. What you will not get is a comprehension of the flip side of the equation, which is, you can look at it in terms of how bad things are, or you can look at it in terms of how good things are. And I think it really points to what Abraham talks about, that you really can't go from very negative to very positive in one step. You just can't do it because our minds simply can't see that far. We literally can't see it. Even if it's right in front of our faces, we can't see it. So we have to move there incrementally.
And there's so many points to this thing. And if you train your mind, if you train your thoughts to look for what is working well, where is the health in your body? If you had some severe illness, let's say you're in pain a lot, and can you take your mind from the pain to something that feels good in your body? And you could say, well, no, because the pain is just too overwhelming. I can't get my mind off the pain. And we've talked about this in other podcasts, and how, for example, this guy who was in the hospital, and everybody knew this guy was in constant pain, and even painkillers that they give him, this very strong things in the hospital, were hardly enough because he just was in so much pain. And one day someone brought in a bunch of little kittens or something that was part of one of those programs to bring into hospitals to get the patients to be happier. Right. And he got so distracted by the beauty of these kittens, or whatever it was, this animal, that he literally went for half an hour and then realized he had had no pain during that entire time. And It was a time when ordinarily he would have been just racked with pain. And it was a huge wake-up call for him and for even the doctors and stuff, because they realized this guy can get beyond this pain. And so anyway, that's to me, like, worst case scenarios can even be mitigated and transformed by our minds. And if we are creating all this reality, if it really is a hologram, which is what I believe it is, and that the universe actually exists within us, and there's layer upon layer back there, and that the bottom line is that there's this brilliant light that is creating this universe. It's sort of like, what is the source? What is the Almighty? What is the God? What is the all that is? What is the infinite intelligence that's behind all of this? And if there's this infinite intelligence behind it all, there is a source, is it possible that source is so in control, and it's channeled through who we are? It is who we are ultimately, that we are somehow creating this planet, and this reality it's all a creation, and creations are mutable. The external push and pull creations that we see of furniture and clouds and plants and other human beings, it's all mutable. It's all constantly in a state of change. And therefore the planet itself is in a constant state of change. And it can go into health, and it can go into what we call death, or illness. It can go either way. But where is our focus?
Right.
In the process, if we are creators, is there a predisposition towards good? Is the universe actually a benevolent and benign place as the bottom line? And therefore, even if you die of cancer or something, are you actually just fine? Or did you attach yourself so much to the death process that it was devastating for you? That it was absolutely overwhelming and just wrecked your whole feeling about life. The fact that you died. And if the earth is going through some major changes, are we going to let it be so devastating to us that it just ruins our whole life? Well, I don't know. I think we have choice here.
I agree. I think we do have choice. We have a choice about how we're going to respond to what happens, but we also have a choice about what role we're going to play in the creation of what happens, as you were describing, that we are ultimately part of the creation process, and indeed we are creators. And when I look at it that way, particularly when I've looked at my own stuff, I begin to realize that this whole thing that we are somehow victims of this terrible thing that's going on, whatever terrible thing it might be. It doesn't matter what the terrible thing is, but we're victims of it. That's a mindset that says, I am powerless. I am not a creator. I am a pawn in someone else's game. And I will therefore always have all kinds of endless numbers of reasons to be upset. That doesn't sound like much of a prospect at all. It sounds pretty miserable when I describe it that way. But that's essentially what we fall for. One of the most interesting things for me, my own political orientation used to be, now it still is, I guess, to an extent, but I just don't buy into the whole political cycle anymore. But one of my political orientation used to be libertarian. And so I associated with libertarians to a large degree. And one of the most fascinating things to do with the libertarian, and indeed you can do this actually with anybody in any political camp, but obviously I did it with libertarians, is to ask them, okay, I know, it works really well with libertarians. I know as a libertarian, you're against big government. You're against regulation. You're against taxes. You're against war. You're against all these things, okay? What do you favor? You've never seen so many blank looks in your life. Just not having a clue what they favored. Why? Because that's not the way the whole thought process is oriented. They don't know how to think in terms of what they favor. In fact, very often I would get an answer that said, well, what I favor is less of the bad stuff. And I said, no, that's what you're against. What do you favor? More blank looks. You're like, I don't know what I favor.
Right.
To which I would reply, well, if you don't know what you favor, how do you expect to get more followers?
Yeah. And it's the same question, one of the biggest questions that ever happens with my clients and that I've gone through myself, and I sometimes still go through it, is what do you want in your life going forward?
Yes.
What do you really want? And so many of my clients say, I don't really know, or I've thought about that some, but I'm not really focused on that. I don't really know what I want going forward. It's so funny, like with this climate change thing, for example. I mean, one of my biggest pet things is trees. I love trees like so much, and I don't know why that is. It's just sort of really deep in me, and maybe that's just a human thing, but it's really deep in me. Just
That's
this
great.
Huge appreciation of trees, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And so when I go up in the mountains, I live right here in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and when I see trees dying because of pine beetle epidemic, which is a climate change supposedly related thing, and I've seen whole forests dying from it, but I've also now when I have that edge of fear in me about climate change becoming a devastating thing to the planet, especially to trees, as one of the species, then if I see one or two trees up there that are starting to die, I literally can get so focused on them that I miss the fact that there's 100 trees right around them that look fantastic.
Isn't that something? Ugh.
Yeah. And that's that syndrome. It's like if I walk into crowds of people now, it's every year that I get older, I'm going to turn 70 this year. Every time I see an older person, each year as I get older, I more identify with the older people and the fact of how decrepit they're starting to look, how difficult time they're having walking, or how much their skin is wrinkled and sagging, and their bellies are getting big, and all these things are happening because they're aging. And I realize I really have a selective way that I look at everything in life based on my fears. It's a lot based on the things that I'm afraid of. It's also based on the things I appreciate. But man, that fear stuff is so deep in our collective consciousness, it certainly is in mine, that I really have to say I need to learn to be a person who's a more selective sifter of the thoughts I'm having, so that I can focus on the things I want to have in my life rather than the things I'm afraid of.
So how have you been doing in terms of doing that sifting? Particularly where the climate change issue is concerned.
With climate change?
Yeah. Have you successfully been able to sift that out yet?
Oh yeah. I mean, now I can go up on a walk in the foothills, and what I do is I literally train myself to look at life. I look for all the signs that life is flourishing. The birds, if I see any birds, or if I look at the green trees, the ones that are doing really fantastic, which is still, thank God, it's most all of them in the foothills around here. Mm-hmm. And I basically, I just sort of say to myself, Tom, focus on the life, focus on the life, focus on even the fact that something is dying is a part of the life process. If here's a funny thing I was thinking about, and I did my own 3-page channeling on this climate change thing. And one of the things I was talking about in that channeling was flowers. And if you go to the florist today and you buy a huge, beautiful bouquet of yellow roses or red roses, and you bring them home and you set them in a lovely vase on your table, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Those things are going to get looking pretty dang bad, and you're not going to want them sitting in a vase on your table.
Right.
And it won't take that long. And so, but do you care? I mean, you still buy the roses and you totally dig them and you totally smell them and you love them and they're gorgeous, and they're literally used as the thing that we give to our lovers to tell them that we think they are the bomb, that everything's incredible about our relationship and that we love them. And so, but look what happens within days, those flowers are completely looking horrible. And it's the same thing I notice, like with all the women I'm dating now, for example, they're in their 60s and, they're all changing massively, just like I am. It's the 60s and 70s are a huge time for life change of our bodies and the way we look and stuff. And so it's such a big thing for me to find the beauty in these women, even though they no longer look like they did in their 50s or their 40s or their 30s. Like, where can I still see this incredibly beautiful human being? Can I appreciate enough about them that I want to be in relationship with them and have, be looking at their face all the time and their bodies as they change and change and change, just like they're looking at mine, and it's a challenge. I just have to admit, it's a challenge to me to let go of the roses in their beautiful state. It's a challenge to me. If this planet was to continue to die, to kind of deteriorate, it would be a challenge to me to watch that happen. And I don't want to go through that. I actually don't. But I actually realized, well, you have to accept the evolution of things from being vibrantly beautiful to being not so vibrantly beautiful, and find the beauty in that process. But I hope that's not what's happened to our planet, that we'll continue to have new life. And you see it all the time. There's always new life coming.
The analogy you gave about the flowers is, it's fascinating to me to look at what happens with women who get flowers or who just buy flowers for themselves. The way that they look at those flowers is interesting to me. I see it with my wife. Certainly, the flowers are going to eventually deteriorate. I usually get that plant food that they put in, so instead of dying in a few days, they last a few weeks. But the way my wife sees it is she has beautiful flowers this day, and beautiful flowers the next day, and beautiful flowers, and beautiful flowers, and beautiful flowers, and beautiful flowers. And then the flowers die. She says, oh, okay, they died. Throw them away. Get some more flowers. I have beautiful flowers, beautiful flowers. All she's looking at is the beautiful flowers. She never hardly even sees the dead flowers. Which is kind of weird because she's a gardener, a professional gardener. And so she has, part of her task is to go into people's gardens and clear out the junk that's died. But she doesn't see it as junk that's died that is, oh, how depressing it died. It's just like, well, we just got to get that out of the way so we can put some more stuff in that's green and growing.
Right.
She doesn't see it as a final state. She sees it as really, really temporary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different way of looking at things. Personally, I've never really had this big thing about having flowers in the house. They're nice, they're pretty, but I give them to her certainly to express how I feel about her. And then, I may notice them out of the corner of my eye, but I really don't see them most of the time. They're just not what I'm looking for, unless they're like really brilliant colors. I like brilliant colors. So, if they're brilliant colors, certainly whenever I pass them, I'll notice, oh, yeah, that's real pretty red, or yeah, that's real pretty yellow, or whatever. But not the way she appreciates it. She just, she'll sit there and she'll tell me as we're, talking or eating dinner or something, oh, I just love my flowers. I'm thinking, wow. What a fantastic level of appreciation that is. I mean, can you imagine what would happen, for instance, if you were able to look at the trees? You talked about the trees, strictly in terms of the trees that are happy and healthy, and just not even pay any attention hardly to the ones that have problems. Can you imagine how much different you'd feel, even more than you've already moved to? Because you've moved tremendously in your life in terms of how you focus. But can you imagine if you got to the point where you didn't even see that other stuff hardly?
Well, that's interesting because I do just challenge myself to get my focus enough on the green, thriving trees that I can have at least an equal experience of appreciation for them that I have for the level of worry that I have about the dying of the things, so if my worry is, triggered by some report of the melting of the ice caps and the plight of the polar bears, or a email that comes in about the end of bees, and how this is going to affect our entire food supply. And can I put my focus on something positive at that time that I can give a whole lot of belief in and focus on? And it's been the thing that's been driving me for at least the last 7 or 8 years, and especially the last 4 years being into Abraham, because Abraham basically says that there is a greater source power that's behind everything, and that it's the same power that causes the planets to, as they say, spin in perfect proximity to each other. It causes, the 4 seasons to take place. I mean, so many things that we know are the essence of life's resilience. And can I focus on that power being in charge, being, so much determining everything, to where I just go into that place of trust, and I live in that place of trust in that higher power, instead of the feeling that I need to get really worried and I need to get really concerned. Because a lot of people would say that without concern, you won't take care of the next 7 generations of the people that want to come to this planet. You won't take care of your grandchildren because you're not taking care of being concerned enough about the environment that you're up in arms about it, you're fighting.
Which is ironic, really, when you think about it, because the irony is they themselves are the ones contributing the most to the deterioration. We are creators. They focus on it. They're the ones all focusing on how bad things are getting. And in doing so, particularly when they do it so in such a large collective, they are all throwing tremendous amounts of source creation at the whole earth just deteriorating. That's really ironic, I think, especially considering what would happen if they were to take all that energy and put it into creation rather than deterioration. Can you imagine what would happen if they all turned it into, they put all their focusing energy, all their creative energy into how beautiful and lush the planet is and how it's growing and filling and recovering and doing all this wonderful stuff. if they were focusing that way, we would have an entirely different experience on this planet. That's what gets me, and it's not just, I'm not picking on them particularly, because it's true of anybody who gets locked into a negative thought pattern. For me, it was monetary system, and the only good thing I can say about it is very few people were like me, so it's not like we had a whole bunch of people who were all focused on this thing. But I mean, I was just obsessed with it. I was obsessed with how bad it is, and how it steals from people, and how it basically provides a way for the rich to get wealthier at the expense of the poor, and all this other stuff. And it was serving nobody to do that. It took me years to realize I wasn't helping anyone with that. I was only harming myself and those who agreed with me. And all we were doing was creating something in our creative process that was going to lead to more bad economic stuff happening. Well, duh, why did I keep doing that? Ultimately, that thought is finally what changed me. I said, you know what? If I have this creative power, if I have this ability to create, then I better damn well start changing my attitude here, because I can change it in both directions. It's up to me where I'm going to focus. So I've been ever since trying to train myself to focus on good, positive, prosperous growth for everyone. Not just for a few, for everyone. And believing in growth for everyone, believing in prosperity for everyone, imagining it, trying to create in my mind all the different scenarios where I could imagine growth and prosperity for everyone without having to go organize some group or get some law passed or whatever, just organizing it in my mind. And in the process of doing that, well, first of all, that's how I let go. I'm still in the process of letting go. I'm like 99% let go, but I'm mostly done. I still have a little bit more to do. But more than that, it has actually gotten me to realize prosperity can be created in my mind. And once I understood that to some slight degree, you don't have to understand it completely. You just have to understand it to some slight degree. That's when the change happens. That's when the shift happens in my own experience, in the way I see things, and in ultimately the long-term results. That's what I've been finding anyway.
Yeah, the funny thing is that if there's a huge macro issue like this climate change or the monetary system and these things, they are the same as a micro issue like having a headache. And it all comes down to one thing: is do you put your focus on the negative, or do you put your focus on what's possible as far as hope and the emotions on the higher end of the scale, of having a better experience. And, the question is, and not even the question, that a lot of what even science, in the realm of investigating human health of the body and the mind, is finding that it makes a huge difference where we put our focus as to the resiliency of our health and our longevity, and the health as we age, and how long we live, like so many things seem to be determined by our mental attitude and our emotional, what we do with our mind and our emotions vastly affects our body. I mean, we did that whole podcast on illness and disease, that one of the conclusions of that discussion was that we promote illness and disease to the degree that we're telling ourselves a story and believing in our illness and disease more than we believe in our health. And, it's a very odd thing, because you feel like you're a victim. People often feel like they're victims of disease and illness. And especially if they have an accident, how did I cause that? I didn't make that happen. And you could say, well, you didn't make it happen per se, but if you believe that it's a vibration-based universe, like vibrations are going to attract like vibrations. And if you're vibrating with something, it's going to show up in your life one way or another.
That's right.
And if you're a creator on the metaphysical level, you're actually much more of a creator than you could ever know that you are. Maybe, that we don't yet know how much we are creating our realities. I mean, even in that quantum physics way, is a lot indicating that The only thing that exists in the universe is consciousness, and it's channeled through us. That's what we really are. And therefore, we are actually the ones who are determining everything that's happening to us on one level. Mm-hmm. And so we're not victims of anything. And what if that's true? Right. Well, that means that, this whole climate change thing is it's just a big macro play that's being played out. But it is also something that we have control over, certainly in our reaction to it, but even in our projection of it as a problem. Does it help? Here's one thing they said. They said, and that Abraham was saying, there are scientists who, of course, say, we know what we're talking about. We must get awareness on this climate change issue. We need to get people to be responsive to this negative thrust that we're offering. So in other words, most of everything that's said about the climate change thing from those in the know is that it's a negative situation. It's a bad thing. And then Abraham said, we will never agree with you humans that a negative thrust is good for you in the short run or in the long run, ever. So, they're basically saying, if you put your thrust into concern and worry and anxiety and believing that that's what it takes to attend to this issue, that they said, we will never agree that that's how you're going to make that issue better.
That's right.
It will never get better by people who are freaked out about it. And then what they go on to say is what it will do, it will destroy your alignment with your source self and essentially tear you apart. And that's exactly what it did to me. Mm-hmm. It tore apart my marriage. It tore apart my financial situation. I let go of the job I had, the business I had for 27 years. All that stuff was vastly affected because I was so worried about the fact that we are all going to hell in a handbasket because we're destroying the very life support system of the earth and all the species on it, And it still appears that we're doing that. And so I need to continually put my focus on the fact that I believe in something that's more broader perspective that's actually in control of the thing we call life itself or creation itself is actually happening from a broader perspective.
Well, one of the reasons we live here, right, is because it's a world of contrast.
Yeah.
So this world of contrast is here for us to basically play in. We're playful, loving creatures who come here to enjoy life. That's why we're here originally. As strange as that sounds, it was strange to me the first time I heard that one, but I've come to realize, that's really what my intention was when I first got here. I still have trouble understanding how I got so wrapped up in the other stuff, but I did. But nevertheless, that was my intention, and it still can be my intention. Okay, well, then if we live in this world of contrast is an opportunity to select what we want and what we don't want. That's our role, right? Our role is not to make everything happen. Our role is simply to be the selectors. I select that I like this. I select that I don't like that. And through this selection process, we're putting together a picture, so to speak, of what it is that we want our lives to be like. Well, okay. What are we doing with climate change? Well, I don't like this. 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 I definitely don't like this. I don't like that or that or that or that or that. And I don't like that. And I don't like that. And I don't like that. Now, what's missing from that equation? So let's see if we can reverse it a little bit. What do we like?
Yeah. And, that's the same thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what do we like? You mentioned one thing that you like a lot. You like the healthy trees. That's pretty cool stuff. Healthy trees are great. Because we know that, first of all, they help us in terms of giving us oxygen. That alone is a major thing. That's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wondrous thing. They provide trees provide homes for animals and for birds. Trees contribute so many great things to the environment. So why not just love trees for a moment? And then while we're loving the trees, why not love the fact that we also have this huge diversity of life form that's here? Instead of getting so upset about all the species that are going away, how about appreciating the species that are here? How about saying, these are great. Look at all the diversity of life that's here. This is wonderful. All this good stuff going on here. You know what? I'm going to say I don't like that, but I love this. Yeah. I love all this great stuff. And look at the color and the smells and the sounds and the textures. They're wonderful. And now we're actively being selectors. We're not just being rejectors. We're being selectors. That's an entirely different space to be in.
Yeah, and we could get excited about if there's so much beauty on this planet and such a huge diversity of gorgeous things, such beauty of just endless proportion in everything, in water, in sand, in clouds, in all the different species, and all the beauty of every different species is just gorgeous, and they all interact with each other in these such amazing ways. And the human body has 70 trillion cells that are all aligning with source, and they're all cooperating and creating organs and creating systems within the body that all function in harmony with each other. And everything on the entire planet, all the air currents and water currents are all functioning in harmony with each other. And every day, everything that's functioning, the earth is the perfect distance from the sun, so that it just is, everything is set up as this incredible, magnificent play by what? Oh, yeah, there's that too. There's some kind of intelligence behind everything that's actually is like, that's what Abraham kept saying, is like, listen, all of your species, everything is constantly giving its request to source, and source is constantly answering it. And that's how evolution itself takes place. And everything is making its requests. And so if you humans are really freaked out about overpopulation, or you're really freaked out about all the things that are dying and changing because of this climate change thing, you're putting a huge request into that source to bring about awesomeness on this planet. You're making a huge request for life to really flourish. It's sort of like, if a person who, say, was really concerned about climate change and they were a doom and gloom person, and then all of a sudden they got really interested in wind energy and solar energy, and they became a huge advocate of wind and solar, and it became totally fun for them, and they started a company, and they became wealthy putting in solar panels, and it just made their life a completely different thing. So instead of being constantly talking about the doom and gloom, they're just all excited about solar, and they're seeing all the potential of solar. Or somebody who got, they put all their focus on growing food because they're worried we're going to lose our food supply, but then their whole life gets wrapped up in the beauty of growing food and how amazing it is to put seeds in the ground, and these things come out of the ground. All you'd put in was this little seed, and here comes this whole plant, and then the plant puts out, all kinds of food for people. And then they get excited about that. So they change their entire focus from worry to enthusiasm. And I think that's the thing you were saying earlier. That's what needs to happen, is that we change from worry to enthusiasm for life.
And for me, you know what the biggest thing that happens is in that? This is just my perspective. But for me, the biggest thing that happens is when you get somebody who does develop that love, the way you just described, and let's say that they get into solar panels, and so they get into the installation of them, and they tie into energy development systems and so forth. And as they do that, an interesting thing happens about their views about climate change. Yes, it's still part of their sales pattern, right? Because you're still trying to sell solar panels. So, I long had an interest in climate change. They'll say something like that. But they won't say much more about it because it's no longer their focus. They know that it's part of the sales process. I mean, you push the hot buttons in order to get people to buy something. So you push the hot button. But you can tell in their own minds that's not the big thing anymore. The big thing is, look at all this energy we're creating out of a renewable resource. It's so exciting.
Yeah, right.
That's the way they're looking at it now. They don't even they know it enough. They certainly inundated themselves enough with it in the past that they're aware of it and they can talk about it. But it's not what they're interested in anymore. Right. They're interested in all this renewable energy they're creating, and that's exciting. It's an entirely different way of looking at it.
Totally. I mean, I was into sales for 27 years. And one thing I can tell you, if you're going to sell solar panels, you're going to sell somebody wind energy. If you've got a vibe of you're trying to sell it out of fear, you can sell things out of promoting fear, but you sell more things out of promoting love and joy.
Absolutely.
Like people want you. When I was doing the college textbook business, professors wanted me in their office when I was joyful. That's when I would really make sales.
Yeah.
When I was having a lot of fun. And I talked about that on another podcast. I mean, but that's how I think everything thrives, by us putting our energy into our joy and our excitement for life and our enthusiasm. And that's really what I think is the key. Like you were saying in the beginning of the show, if you had millions and millions of people who were getting excited about how beautiful this world is and how beautiful nature is, we wouldn't have as many people who were worried about climate change, because we would be putting so much focus into what is working right, and what species are doing great, and how can we promote those species doing even better. And it doesn't mean that we don't, if someone feels called to go and speak before Congress about, the problems of fossil fuels, how they're not a good idea anymore. Well, I think whatever enthusiasm a person has that turns their crank, I think they should do it, but my calling is to step back into the broader perspective and talk about that right now,
Which is great. And I firmly believe that if, let's project something that isn't currently happening. If the entire or most of the climate change community that gets so upset about stuff going on, if that entire community or most of that community were to shift their thinking into what they appreciate and what feels good and what they're happy about regarding the climate, regarding the environment, I believe the climate and the environment itself would change to match those beliefs. I believe that the trends that the climate change doom and gloomers have been pointing to all this time would change. The pointers would change. The indications would change. The tests would produce different results, because we are creators.
That's right.
So the best thing we can actually do is to be the Pollyannas of an environment. To be the ones that say not that the sky is falling, but that the sky is gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually believe that really strongly. And it's been one reason why I haven't yet to do this podcast on climate change, because my bottom line is that we are all vibrating. We're all broadcasting a message, a vibration into the quantum field. And the quantum field, according to quantum physics, it seems to extend throughout the entire, anything we would know of the known universe. So that what I actually believe is that each of us is a little broadcasting station. And if we broadcast solutions, possibilities, love, appreciation, joy, instead of, fear, worry, anxiety, anger, is that by broadcasting that appreciation, we do more to bring it about than we ever could if we pushed against the fossil fuel companies for 10 years and we filed angry lawsuits against everything that we were upset about, that with the people that we hate because they're hurting the environment. Now I don't think that we should necessarily stop filing the lawsuits and things, but the vibration, I think each person, it would behoove each of us to ask ourselves, what's the vibration behind what I'm doing? Because if my vibration that I'm putting out through filing my lawsuit or through, writing my letter to the editor of the paper, or the actions that I take to protest, whatever I'm doing, is my vibration, is my broadcasting station putting out a vibration that's part of the problem or part of the solution? Because, what you push against, in a way, by saying no, 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 you're in that vibration of negative energy.
No, it's a hard thing to recognize that when I keep saying no to something, I'm inviting more of it.
It's hard to recognize that.
That's a very hard concept, not just to recognize, but to deal with emotionally. How could it be that if I say no to something that I really don't like, I'm inviting more of it? That just rubs us the wrong way, and yet it's the truth.
Yeah,
and it's always true.
And and another big thing to address in this issue is, or we could or could not, is if I don't do something, am I irresponsible as a citizen? In other words, if I don't take a stand, I went to a meeting the other day, I guess it was Friday, that was about, with a group whose sole mission is, they're called the Eco Dharma Group, and a lot of them are Buddhists, because Boulder's full of Buddhists, and they are trying to organize to fight fracking, which is a huge problem for global climate change plus the pollution of groundwater. And besides taking over habitat of other species by putting in this massive amount of these pads that will then go down and get natural gas from the rock deep in the earth by fracking it with using massive amounts of water and toxic chemicals. And, but they're pushing against, they want to push against, they want to do civil disobedience and even perhaps, get hammers and things and go destroy some of this equipment.
Oh boy. Wow.
And things like that.
Yeah.
And they want to be arrested because they want to make a statement that makes an issue so that people realize how serious this issue of fracking is.
And it's so clear to me as you describe that they don't realize how they're going to contribute to building and increasing fracking.
That's the thing that I think is worth addressing in this conversation, maybe the next show, because we're going to be talking about this Tuesday night on live call-in show, which we invite anybody who this is pushing your buttons in any way whatsoever, in a good way or in an intense way, give us a call and let's talk more about it, because I'm open to hearing anybody's opinion on it.
Oh, me too.
I don't know if I can handle your opinion, but I'll listen.
Oh, I can handle any of it.
Yeah. Well, you're just so resilient. But I think I'm willing to talk about it from any angle whatsoever, because I think it's all relevant. Because I listened to these 12 people in the room, and they each went around and talked about why they're doing what they're doing, and I could relate to it all. I was the same person a few years ago. I would have been sitting in that room, facing the same dilemma: am I going to get myself arrested, by taking a stand for my children and my grandchildren and that's what they're talking about, the 7 generations to come, that we need to let these companies know and our governments know that this is harmful to our planet. And when do you take a stand against a bully who comes into your neighborhood and says, we want a ton of money, so we're going to put up 10,000 fracking wells in your county? And we've seen what it's done to the counties next to our county, and it's horrible. And so, we don't want it to happen here. Well, what kind of stand do you take? Are you just one of these, law of attraction guys who said, well, I'm just going to vibrate good vibrations and everything will be fine? Or do I've got to get up and go to the state legislature and do a sit-in at the steps of the Capitol to let my representatives know that this means a hell of a lot to my kids and to the future generations, and I will not let this happen. So I think it's an interesting question. And are you being responsible to your vibration as you are to the environment? Because if you're part of a vibration of fear and anxiety and stress, are you actually helping by doing that action, or are you actually making it worse?
Well, I think it's a good topic, and I'll be glad to address it myself. I'm sure you will. And I'm sure that anyone who calls in who wants to talk about it, they'll be addressing it in a big way, I'm sure. So let's look forward to it, because I think it's going to be great, because I think we can do a lot of exploration of this topic. And so please do join us Tuesday evening, where Tom and I do every Tuesday evening from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's specifically a time for people to call in and talk about what it is that is uppermost in your mind. So, Tom, let's do it Tuesday night.
Okay. I'm on.
I'm on too, and we hope you'll be on as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.